Jackie's 19th podcast, March 8th, 2025, and we're rolling.
Hello, my name is Jackie Geringer McDermott, and we are recording live from the English Valley's History Center in North English, Iowa. This diary or journal was written by my great-great-aunt, Mary Elizabeth Claypool Wade, who was known as Libby Wade. Here is a picture of Libby with her older brothers and sisters. She's the one on this side. She was my grandmother's aunt and the matriarch of our very, very large family. Libby lived a half a block east of Main Street in a little house on Oak Street in North English, Iowa, until near the end of her life in 1959. She was 71 years old in 1946. I don't remember her, but she knew me as a baby. Downtown North English was also the center of my life as I grew up. I would like to introduce you page by page to the cast of characters from North English, Iowa and the surrounding English Valleys area. August 1st, 1946. Made kraut today. Suzanne brought us some tomatoes and liver from Wayne's. Bertha and Jack and the boys started on a trip today to Arkansas. Aunt Edie and Ruth were here in the evening. Ruth has 2 children, Daryl and Donna. They had been to Gales near Keswick. Her name is Moothart. Libby made sauerkraut today. Her great-granddaughter, Suzanne Kurtz, brought up some tomatoes and liver from her own grandparents' house just a block away. Bertha and Jack would be my grandparents, John and Bertha Geringer, and their children who went to a vacation in Arkansas. Aunt Edie was the aunt of Libby's children, or her sister-in-law, Edith Chapman Wade, the wife of Alexis or Lec Wade. Ruth Alwine was Edie's daughter, and her children were Daryl Alwine and Donna Alwine. Edie's other daughter that they were talking about was Gail Wade Moothart from Keswick. August 2nd, 1946. Lena brought me the book to record secret work. Mary R. here. Warm today. We are to get some more potatoes of Mary. Glenn G. stopped and said Carl's boys went with John's. I went over to Newberry's in the evening. Jenny Harper called from Iowa City. Mr. Harper has cancer of the liver. Daughter-in-law Lena Wade Wallace was also in Rebecca Lodge with Libby, so she brought her some work from the lodge. Mary Regseger was Libby's friend and neighbor with a large garden that she shares with Libby and family, and this is Mary on this side when she was younger. Glenn was my Uncle Spark Geringer. He stopped to see his great Aunt Libby and informed her that his cousins on the Geringer side, the boys of Carl Geringer, went with the John Geringers to Arkansas on vacation. Clara Newberry is Libby's elderly neighbor, and she's on this side in this picture, and on this side is her brother that had cancer, Clyde, and his wife, Jenny. August 3rd, 1946. Mrs. Newberry came to get flowers to take to the hospital. They went this p.m. I went down to Wayne's. Phyllis Hall and Lanny and Dickie were here. In the evening, Mrs. Shute, Leona, and Baby and little girls were here. Evelyn was here a while. 2 very warm tonight. Libby has flower gardens, so Mrs. Newberry stopped to get a nice bouquet to take to the hospital with her. Wayne, on this side of this picture, it right there, is her oldest son, who lives a block south, and the attraction down at Wayne's this summer has been the south porch where they can get a breeze since it has been so hot. Jessie Shute and Leona Glantz and baby John Amos Glantz were friends of the family who came to visit. And this is a picture of John from later in life, and he also graduated from English Valleys High School. Evelyn Kurtz is Libby's married granddaughter, and she's this one in the picture. August 4th, 1946. Belva's baby weighs 12 pounds. Hazel was sick last night. I went alone in the a.m. I was alone in the a.m. Russell came home and we had dinner. He and Mr. Warner went fishing, and Elsie and Luella and Dooley and 2 boys from Brooklyn came for a ball game here. Elsie stayed, and we went down to Wayne's, then over to Evelyn's a while. After they went home, I came home. Soon Louise and family came, had been to Marengo. Belva's baby is Mick Yoss, who was also an EV graduate. Hazel Cobb is Libby's young married granddaughter. Russell or Tyler Wade was Libby's son she lives with, and he went fishing with his boss, Mr. Warner, would be E.B. Warner from the North English Lumber Company. Elsie Parker is the ex-wife of Libby's nephew, Jaunty Claypool. This is Elsie on this side, and this is Jaunty on that side. Jaunty was the son of her brother, Arthur Benton Claypool. Luella Claypool Bailey is the daughter of Jaunty and Elsie, and this is Luella and her husband, Dooley. And they are also friends / relatives to Wayne and Jenny, and are also friends with her granddaughter, Evelyn Kurtz, and her husband, Wayne. And Louise that came in the evening is Louise Claypool Long. There's a picture of them. That's my grandma's sister and Libby's niece, the daughter of her brother, Arthur Benton Claypool. August 5th, 1946. Louis B.'s 30th birthday. Rained all a.m. Russell went to CR. I wrote to Anna. I heard that Paul Scepter is sick. They think it might be polio. Louis Benton Claypool is Brother Benton's grandson, the son of Jaunty Claypool and his ex-wife Elsie Parker. Dr. Claypool lives in Phoenix. My brother is named Louis Benton Geringer, but his name is spelled Louis in honor of Mom's grandfather, Louis Vandy Kirkhope, and Benton in honor of Dad's grandfather, Arthur Benton Claypool, as was Louis Benton Claypool's middle name, Benton. Paul Scepter, that might have polio, is a friend from North English. August 6, 1946. Russell went to Riverside. I washed. Had other work too, so was pretty tired. Nice today. Roy Wallace is 68 today. Roy Wallace is on this side of this picture, and he's the father of daughter-in-law Lena Wallace Wade. August 7th, 1946. Ironed in the a.m. Went up to Ina's after dinner. She wanted me to come. Had some sweet corn and tomatoes for us. Hattie was here. Recited the secret work. Cool today. Ina is Inabelle McKinstry Claypool, her friend Vertie's sister-in-law, and also the widow of her cousin Wallace Claypool. Ina is elderly. And Hattie that stopped over is Hattie Newberry Killian, her 55-year-old friend and fellow lodge member. August 8th, 1946, Jenny's birthday. Mary R. here in the PM. Jenny here. She had been to see Dr. Doyle, and he wants her to go see Dr. Moon. Thinks she needs an operation at once. He thinks Lena's problem is thyroid deficiency, not anemia. Evelyn and Hazel brought us some homemade ice cream and cake for the birthday, from the birthday party. Russell went to Wellman and to Iowa City in the PM. Jenny Wade is Libby's daughter-in-law, and she's right there in this picture. And Evelyn Kurtz and Hazel Cobb, Evelyn's up here and Hazel's right there, are Jenny's married daughters. August 9th, 1946, Stella Wallace's birthday. Evelyn brought Suzanne to stay with me for a while. She went to the beauty parlor. Jenny, Belva, and Frida went to CR. Russell brought home some centennial stamps, the first I have seen. Mary R. brought some eggs. Stella Wallace here. Also Minnie and Nanny. I went over to see Hattie. May Rohr was there. Stella Wallace Markwell Wallace is the mother of daughter-in-law Lena Wade. Suzanne Kurtz is Libby's oldest great-granddaughter, and she is almost 4 years old now. Jenny and her daughters Belva Yoss and her daughter-in-law Frida Wade all went to Cedar Rapids with Jenny to see the doctor. Minnie Smart Claypool, on this side of this page, was Brother Werner's widow and the only other living member of Libby's sibling group and spouses. Minnie and Libby have birthdays close together and always celebrate together. Nanny Smart is Minnie's sister who also lives with her. May Rohr was an old neighbor from Parnell who had moved to Cedar Rapids. August 10th, 1946. Mary Regsager is 69 today. Had a letter from Anna last night. Mylan is working in a hospital. Jenny says Dr. Moon says she doesn't need an operation now. Hattie was here. Miss McDonald stopped and they had a telegram from Father Dugan today. He arrived in Ireland. Been gone from here 3 weeks. Dorothy and Mamie Gehring are here. Dorothy's baby is 5 months old, has 2 teeth. Anna Cray, right there in this picture, is Libby's only daughter, and she lives in Texas, and she writes frequently to her mother. Grandson Mylan Richard Cray, the one on this side, right here, is working in a hospital. He's just been discharged from the Navy and is working in a hospital. I'm a little confused about who Miss McDonald is that Libby refers to. I think it's Miss Teresia McDonald, who would later become the housekeeper for Father Dugan, the Catholic priest. Teresia, or Trace as she was called, was married to Charles McDonald, who passed away in 1947. She was the mother of Wade McDonald and 2 girls who were already married by then. Father Dugan was the Catholic priest that lived in the rectory on Boland Street, a block away. He had finally arrived in Ireland to see his mother. His father had previously passed away, and he wanted to get to Ireland to visit. According to the North English Record newspaper, he was delayed in New York due to difficulties arranging air passage. And in the Centennial book, there's a picture of Father P.V. Dugan. Mamie Gehringer, that was there, is the wife of her great-nephew, Glenn Gehringer. And Dorothy Gehringer, on this side, is the wife of her great-nephew, Donald Gehringer. Her baby is Donna Ray Gehringer, right there in that picture. She's my cousin from Alabama that we went to see last winter. Her birthday was yesterday. Happy birthday, Donna, and happy birthday to your daughter, Wendy, and grandson, Gus, too. August 11th, 1946. Cool again today. I've been alone most of the day. Russell went to church and after dinner went fishing. I've been reading David the King. Got that centennial edition of the Cedar Rapids Gazette. Monday, August 12th, 1946. Still quite cold. Temperature at Spencer, 47 degrees. Around 60 here. I washed but had to bring it in partly dry. Sent centennial paper to Anna and to W.D. Claypool. Went up to Inez. Carried tomatoes home. Mary R. and Mary Zilmer Yoder were here in the evening. Hattie was here. Libby is hanging her clothes outside to dry, and she got more produce from Ina Claypool's garden. Ina McKinstry Claypool is the elderly widow of her cousin Wallace Claypool and has a nice garden that presumably someone helps with, where Libby has been getting some extra produce. Mary Zilmer Yoder and Mary Regsager were old friends from the Green Valley area east of town, where Libby taught school years ago. August 13th, 1946. Another cool day. Had a fire a while in the morn. My little hen bird dead in the cage. Didn't feel very well, so didn't do much. Went to lodge in the evening. The staff practiced their drill. They are to take the moon and stars to Marengo tomorrow night. I Googled the moon and stars to see what that meant, and it was a banner that represents the never-failing order which pervades the universe and all of nature and suggests to the members of the group the value of system, regularity, and precision in all worthy undertakings. August 14th, 1946. Drizzle all day and cold. Russell went to CR in the PM. Had planned to go to Marengo, but I gave it up. It was too wet for enjoyment. Had a letter from Louise today. Louise Claypool Long is Libby's niece, the sister of my grandmother, Bertha Gehringer. August 15th, 1946. Cleared and is warmer. Mrs. Gibbon Morris and Verdi here in the PM. Sent a letter to Louise and one to Blanche Milo. Mrs. Isabel Gibbons Morris was previously married to Wilford Mahana, who passed away in 1920. Wilford was an older brother to Libby's good friend Verdi Mahana McKinstry. Blanche Milo was Libby's niece on the Wade side. Oh, this is a picture of Isabel Gibbons Morris. I can't find one of Ernie, but I found one of her sister-in-law. Blanche Milo was Libby's niece on the Wade side, daughter of Martha Wade Miller. Blanche and her husband Henry Milo lived at McCallsburg, Iowa. That is the end of the diary portion of the program for this week. If you have any pictures that you would like to share, or anyone we have featured, or any information in the upcoming program, please let me know. I still don't have a picture of Hattie Killian and Verdi McKinstry, who were two of Libby's closest associates. Next week's program is on the Miller hardware family, specifically Liesl Miller. A lot of work goes on behind the scenes to keep the History Center operating. That includes cataloging sessions, creating displays, coordinating and preparing for monthly programs, keeping up the social media, finances, cleaning, maintenance, and providing treats for programs. There's a whole lot more activity that supports the center operations, and it is largely contributed through time and effort by the board of directors. The History Center board is composed of Dave Jackson, president, Scott Romine, vice president, Bonnie Romine, secretary, Don Banning, treasurer, and directors Carolyn Elwood, Shelley Gerard, Alan Ackerman, and Dan Best. Please send donations to the English Valley's History Center. Please, P.O. Box 70, North English, Iowa, 52316. Our featured story this week is the Spanish influenza epidemic of 1918. I must give credit for the bulk of this research to Dave Jackson. He became very interested in this historical subject when he was stuck at home early during the COVID pandemic and wrote a paper for the Iowa County Historical Society. For some reason, there are no North English Record newspapers from that era, so much of the research was done in the Williamsburg and Marengo newspapers. This segment will be divided into two parts. Number one, how it spread, and number two, who it affected. I have become interested because of who it affected, as several of the people that I am learning so much more about each week had their lives greatly impacted by the outbreak of influenza just over 100 years ago in the North English area. World War I was drawing to a close in the fall of 1918, and the nation was consumed with news of war. Much of the epidemic news was not front-page news, but was reported like something happening in Europe, affecting our troops overseas. But now we can understand that those troops moving around the world on crowded ships and railroad cars and back to the United States were carrying flu germs. More soldiers died from influenza than were killed in battle. The flu rampaged in Iowa from October 1918 until February 1919. Precautions were taken. Schools were closed from 3 to 12 weeks starting in early October, and there were to be no meetings, church services, funerals, movies, or social gatherings, and social distancing was encouraged. But the flu hit hard. I counted as many as 35 people from North English who died, and many more were very sick. For example, on October 18th, the Des Moines Register reported 450 new cases of influenza in Millersburg, and with 40 of them progressing to pneumonia. There were 7 private funerals in one weekend in North English in October 1918. One of the things that caused so much infection was that people traveled back and forth to Camp Dodge in Des Moines and other Army camps around the country. For example, John Thomas from Camp Dodge and Miss Grace Thomas from Mount Vernon were called home because of the serious sickness of their brother and his wife, Roscoe and Merle Thomas, who both died from influenza and pneumonia. Another example was when Vernie Claypool, who was Lib Wade's older brother, and John Kolasic, the father of Neva Cray, quote, went to Camp Dodge last week to see Ray Claypool and Charles Kolasic. Charles is quite sick with the influenza. Later, Charles Kolasic died at Camp Dodge in Des Moines on Monday afternoon. Here's a picture of Ray Claypool and his wife, Maud Foster, who was Libby's good friend. And here's a picture of Charles Kolasic, who died of the influenza. And then this article from the October 23rd Marengo newspaper, that Mr. and Mrs. A.P. Humphreys received a telegram last night that their son Rain was seriously ill with pneumonia at Camp Humphreys, Virginia. They started at once, but he was dead before they reached there. Rex Brown, who was also stationed at Camp Humphreys, accompanied the body as an escort back to North English. Rex was the brother of Mace Brown, the baseball player who was only 9 years old at that time. J.C. Brown, their brother, who was only 17 years old and a senior in high school, had just passed away October 11th. It was written that J.C. had a delicate constitution, meaning that he probably had a pre-existing condition. A few months later, the Brown family learned that in early 1919, son Von Braun passed away of influenza and pneumonia in France where he was serving. It was also said that Vaughn could have been major league material as he was also a great ball player. This school picture is from Willow Grove School from 1908, and it shows Von Braun in the back row right there, and his brother JC in the front right there. I wish I had a better, clearer copy of that picture. By the end of October, people were ready for the pandemic to be over, and school was scheduled to resume on Monday, November 11th, 1918. And then, quote, "It was a day of great rejoicing here Monday when the word came that Germany had signed the armistice. Bells were rung, fire gongs sounded, guns fired, cheering and raising of flags. In the afternoon, people gathered on the street, and the band played, and Reverends Krenmeyer and Heighton made speeches. Afterwards, we went to the cemetery. Large flags were placed on the graves of our two boys, namely Rain Humphreys and Charles Kolosik, who died here, meaning of the flu, and a large flag erected in memory of Ross Hadley, Ernest Bickford, and Roy King, who died in France, and a flag placed on Mrs. Burrow Long's grave, who died recently of influenza, and whose husband is in France. In the evening, a large parade, speeches, a large bonfire for the children, and a dance at Liberty Hall." Social distancing was out the window. There were still deaths from November and December, but by early 1919, things were starting to wind down. Other people on the influenza victims list that I am familiar with include Walter Reese, age 20, who was in Ames at military training school, the brother of Mildred Reese, who was Russell Wade's girlfriend, and brother-in-law of Ursel Reese and Mrs. Doris Reese, our EV teacher. Jesse Elwood Cox, known as Jay Cox, age 31, and Mervyn Cox, age 36, sons of Dr. and Mrs. John Ralston and Marietta Cox, ancestors of my friend and faithful listener, Julie Cox Steinerson. And their pictures in the Centennial book. The Cox family is right here, and the two boys that died are in the top row on that side. Margaret Alberta Roller Long, who was just 18 years old and married in May to Burrow Long, who was overseas in the service of our country. She was an aunt of my teacher, Doris Roller Reese, and a great aunt to Dave Mullen and Merton Geiger and others. Roscoe and Merle Thomas. Roscoe Miles Thomas and his wife, Catherine Merle Schaefer Thomas, were both 28 years old and died in December. Aunt and uncle of my friends, Will J. Thomas III, Danny Thomas, and Bob Thomas. Anna Carter West, age 43, the daughter of David and Cynthia Carter and our Carter family, and wife of Samuel West, and mother of Waldo, Winter, North, Farmer, Milo, and Juan West. Charles Earl Kolosik, age 30, who died at Camp Dodge, the son of Mr. and Mrs. John Kolosik that had the broom factory. From South English, the parents of Elma Brubaker, who were 41-year-old Jacob Henry Brower and his 38-year-old wife, Lottie Virginia Kaiser Brower. Descendants that I know of that are listeners to my program are Connie Brubaker Scanlon and her cousin Mike Carter, the husband of Linda Holden Carter. Mr. and Mrs. Brower died 51 hours apart and were the parents of 17-year-old Alma, 14-year-old Edna, and 5-year-old Esther. The two younger girls also had influenza but recovered. Elva Anita Lockridge Van Aken, Mrs. Dave Van Aken, age 30, the mother of Lyle Van Aken. Herbert Benton Carter, age 28, who was Lila Cobb's first husband, and the father of Viola or Mickey Ballard, mother of my listener Louise Davis and her brother Lindine Ballard, and also the father of Harley or Pat Carter, who's Arnold Carter's dad. Herbert Carter was my grandma Geringer's first cousin, as his parents were William Smith or Dick Carter and Iowa Powers. David Benjamin Carter, age 40, the son of William and Harriet Carter. I don't have a picture of him, but there's his parents, William and Harriet Carter. William Carter was the brother to Stephen Carter, my ancestor. Mrs. Mary Etta Scott Morrison, who was Mrs. Ed Morrison, age 36. She was the mother and stepmother of 11 children with one stepdaughter being Hattie Wilkerson, the mother of the Wilkersons from North English, and her son was Raymond Morrison, who was married to Elma Johnston. Milton Carter, who was age 29, the son of Asa Carter and Laura Wirtz Carter, and the father of Rita Carter. Milton's widow, I don't have a picture of Milton, but Milton's widow was Goldie Pickenpaw Carter, who was my grandpa John Geringer's first cousin. Goldie later married Louis Robu and had 8 more children, among them Jean Harris, mother of Jan Harris Stevenson and Barb Harris Rickard and Rick Harris. Forrest Carter, age 17, another son of Asa Carter and his second wife, Florence Rogers Carter, who I pointed out in the Yankee Point picture last week. He's in the back row, right there. He was the grandson of Emma Welch Rogers, who at age 90 years was the oldest living Yankee Point student when she passed in 1946. Beth Carter, my listener from North English, would also be in this line. Ira Newberry, 28, from Millersburg, son of Libby's friend, Mrs. Clara Newberry, and her husband, Willard Newberry. Others that were mentioned in the Williamsburg Journal Tribune as passing from the flu in North English were Mr. Hotstedler, husband and father of 3 children. Elmer Gunther, age 22, the son of Mr. and Mrs. August Gunther. John Edmondson, age 35. Pauline Rogner Mahana, age 22, the wife of George Mahana. Ruth Pearl Williams Van Dyke, age 26, the wife of Clarence Van Dyke. The young son of Mr. and Mrs. Thad Miller. Raymond Bronner, age 34, father of 3 girls, and the husband of Sarah Riffle Bush and brother-in-law to Bertha Ballard from North English. Vesta Scott, wife and mother of 2 children. Mary Jane Thomas Simmons, wife of Riley Simmons, age 56, and mother of 4 sons. C.R. Hardy, age 36, husband and father of 2 children. Mabel Lindsay, age 13, daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Ed Lindsay. Ralph Stover, age 25, and the father of 1 son. Hazel Thomas Reesner, daughter of Mr. and Mrs. J.D. Thomas, age 23, who was the mother of Carol Reesner, who was not yet 2 years old, and who was a half-brother to Gene Duncan from Watchhere. And Francis Keith Wagner, age 1.5, and Burton Wagner, age 3.5, sons of Mr. and Mrs. Guy Wagner, who are buried in Armagh Cemetery west of town. Although I found other documentation that said those 2 little boys had died of diphtheria. In the good news department from 1918, when I was researching, I found these 2 articles about Lib Wade's nephew, Roy Claypool, the grandfather of my friends, the Webbers from Kinross. This article was from December 1918, and it said, "It was a happy day at the Verney Claypool home last Sunday. They received a letter from Roy Claypool, who was reported missing in action on October 6th. He is now well and is in England. As soon as the people around town heard the glad tidings, they all seemed as very well pleased, for after all, he was a boy of the entire community, and everyone wants the soldier boys to come home and take up the work where they left off to do the fighting." In January 1919, Roy Claypool came home from Fort Des Moines. He was met at the depot by the band and a large crowd of friends. He is looking fine, and everyone is glad to see him return. Roy was wounded in battle in France and taken prisoner. And here's a picture of Roy and brother Ray Claypool in their uniforms. The following correspondence segment was delayed from last week as the program was getting too long. I have a new listener this week from the East Coast. Beth Carter shared my podcast with him. He is Chris Carter, the grandson of Wallace Carter, and I am excited to share North English and Carter family history with him. He is also a descendant of the oldest student at Yankee Point, Emma Welch Rogers, and he shared a good copy of the newspaper picture of her and her husband, John Rogers, and her daughter, Florence Viola Rogers Carter, the wife of Asa Carter and the mother of Forrest Carter, who was a Yankee Point student who died at age 17 of influenza, and his grandfather, Wallace Carter, and other Carter children. I heard from Mark Claypool, who's usually the first to comment each week. "Jackie, this week was so memorable with names and places. I can actually picture these people in the community and how they each played a part in North English. Thanks again for your inspiration and bringing the past to the present." Andy Weber said, "Very interesting this week. Enjoyed hearing about Roy Butler. She was my great aunt, and she was a great aunt. Thank you, Jackie, for your time putting this together." I also heard from Bill Weber from Riverside, wanting a copy of my narrative about Roy Butler, and also the picture of her and her brothers and sisters. which I was glad to send him. I also sent some pictures to his sisters, Cindy and Peggy Weber. I met with Amy Fobert Tracta from Wichita, Kansas over the weekend, and we talked about North English history. Her mom, Patty Gerard Fobert, wants to hear about the harness races at Green Valley, where her dad was involved in the early 1950s. She said that Lana James and or Twyla Gerard had shown her a picture at one time. I told her I would work on that. Vera Dye said, I remember when my dad had the barbershop closed for funerals back in the 60s. Speaking of barbershops, Dave Jackson gave me some information from Lori Dennis Crum from Swisher and originally from Wat Cheer about the barbershop her ancestors on the Dennis side had in North English. I'm going to look into that some more. Pam Kavanaugh Shield from Cedar Rapids says, excellent history lesson, Jackie, of our hometown North English. So many families mentioned that really makes me wish I could go back in time for a visit. All of your broadcasts are wonderful with so many memories. Thank you. I talked to my husband's sister from Alaska, Betty Schlomer, and she said she is a listener. She thinks it's interesting, and not just because it's me doing the program. I heard from Sue Oliver Cheney. Many thanks, Jackie, for bringing back memories for us old folks. Cindy Coleman Hahn said, I look forward every week to looking back in time. Thank you, Jackie. Sharon Wilhide Hagan wrote to say, so many memories of North English. I was raised in town, too. Rita Wade from New York City said, I enjoy listening to Libby's Day to Day, which is really the history of North English and the people living during that time. I truly appreciate the time and research Jackie puts into her weekly broadcasts. Bravo. My friend Helen Kirkpatrick Schweetert from Colesburg, Iowa and Lake Placid, Florida, called to talk about Laura Schaff that I mentioned last week, being the daughter of Libby's buddy Millie Knipfer. Laura Schaff's husband, Merle Schaff, is related to Helen, which led me into a little more research into the Miller Hardware family, who will be featured next week. Hint, Helen's grandma Kirkpatrick is in the Miller family. Helen had lunch in Florida this week with her cousin Connie Baugh, who is Bill Zuber's daughter. I told her it is a small world, as Connie Baugh is friends with my buddy Paula Welsh from Amana. Helen said, is that the same Welshes as the Welshes that I met on the plane last week that were going to see Paul and Chris Geringer in Florida? I said yes, but they're really distant related to her husband, Leonard Welsh. My friend Paula Welsh is from the Fells family, and she's an Amana person who was raised on Main Street in Maine, Amana, and she was going to tell Connie Baugh that we mentioned Bill Zuber. I stopped and saw my childhood friend, Kathy Morrison-Netzer, at the Williamsburg Historical Commission to ask if she wants to go on camera with me for the Texaco fire story. And she said no, but she will find out what she can about the fire and other items from the Vanakan side of her family. She also wants me to do a story on the Smoky Row kids. So we're making a list and checking it twice, so please send pictures to me for this project. You can just take a picture of the picture from me on your phone camera and then send it to me in Messenger. Then I can upload and print it. I would also like to mention that the next English Valley's alumni bruncheon at Bryant's in the Williamsburg Mall will be held at 11:30 a.m. on April 28th. Please contact Alice Stramer or Linda Carter for reservation. I had a wonderful time the other day and gathered some more information for programs. This week, we learned of the passing of Ed Sauter from the English Valley's high school class of 1966. Our condolences to his family. The 2025 programs are announced on the History Center site. They are all on Sunday afternoon programs at 2 p.m., with the exception of the reunion, which will run all afternoon on Saturday, July 26th. There's a flyer on the EV's graduates page if you need more information about when decades of classes will meet during the alumni reunion on July 26th. The parade is at 10:30 a.m. Starting at noon, snacks and drinks will be available at the History Center, paid for by sales from the Everyone at EV book for 2025, with the pictures of all the graduates since 1957. That book will be available after graduation. I will be doing a live broadcast before the parade at 9 a.m. and staying after around in the History Center after the parade to visit with alumni. We are also interested in learning about historical English Valley's items that you might wish to donate to the History Center. This morning, we have a display in here this morning of baseball memorabilia from Dave Fobert. You might want to come look at if we're here till about 10 o'clock. And we also have an interesting acquisition next week I'm going to show you. Please contact Dave Jackson, Scott Romine, or any board member to donate. See you next week.